Hey, happy Monday afternoon. Dr. Alan Christensen here with you, and welcome to another installment of Office Hours Live. So glad to be with you, and this is your time to get some questions answered. Uh, if you're joining, say hi and tell me where you're from. Always curious to see where everyone is attending from. Let me just adjust my screen so I can see what's going on here too. Here we go. Getting a little more screen space. There we go. Okay, so I'm with you guys on Facebook, on Instagram, and on YouTube Live. So wherever you are, we can connect. The topics we can cover: food, diet, health. Those are some big ones. Thyroid disease, adrenal issues. Those are the more subcategories. And the idea here is that there's always some topics that get sent in advance, and I'll pull from those and grab some of the most popular and talk about them a bit first. Then we'll grab a few of the ones that come in live. And with the live ones, details are great. Don't be afraid to put lots of stuff in there. So I'm seeing lots of folks come on. I'm just adjusting my screens here so I can stay on top of things really well. Here we go. Okay. So yeah, now as far as what was sent in advance, the one that I've heard the most has been about the use of prophylactic iodine for possible radiation exposure. And sad thing that this is necessary, but it is. The real tragic thing taking place in the world right now, and concerns about actual nuclear war or damage to nuclear reactors. And if that were to happen, what would happen with radioactive fallout? And no mystery, there's been data saying that iodine can help protect people against some of the problems of radiation exposure. So when is that? When is it helpful? When is it not? I'll cover all that with you guys right now in some really good detail. I'm seeing a lot of you jumping on, so welcome, welcome. Hey, Joanne, good to see you, my friend. I'm glad you're with. Always glad to see you with on Office Hours. And I'll give feedback about questions that are popping up. One from Kim: what lifestyle measures can be used to address low T3? Kim, let's talk about this. So tell me your concerns about low T3, why you think you have that, what your numbers were. And here's another thing, you guys. So friends answer questions. Real friends might question questions because, yeah, sometimes. I remember one time I asked a friend about, how to hire for a particular position. Like, who would you recommend for a particular position? And his response was, "Do you need someone for that position?" And we talked it through, and I really didn't. So that was a great example of a friend questioning my question. So Kim, I'm questioning your question. I can answer it as it is, but there may be a better question there or a better issue behind that. I'd love to see if we can't probe and get to that. So put a question up, stick around. We can get some going back and forth, making sense out of that. So Kim, you responded about T3 being 67. That's your total T3. If you can put some more data up about your other thyroid labs and about your concerns, I'll give you some more context about that. So please, if you can share more of your thyroid panel, I can make some more sense out of that. Okay, so back to the top topic, and I'll go on this one, then we'll come back to Kim's question, and then we'll see what else comes up. So the top one was about radiation and about the tragic situation in Ukraine, risks for radiation exposure. And I'm seeing a lot of questions people are asking about iodine supplements and radiation. So the general idea is that if you're exposed to nuclear fallout, iodine is talked about as being one of the things you'd want to do. So a lot of folks here in the US are hearing about the fact that, oh, geez, hate to talk about this, but yeah, maybe there could be a power plant that's damaged, or there could be perhaps some issue of actual launching of tactical nuclear weapons. And would we want to take iodine here to protect us from that? So the reason iodine helps and how it helps is that it shuts off your thyroid. So if you're exposed to radiation, there's a lot of different kinds of that, a lot of species, they say, and some of them can be radioactive iodine. Now, the thyroid, takes up iodine and concentrates it. If the thyroid concentrates radioactive iodine, you could probably guess that that wouldn't be a good thing, and you would guess right. If it does that, then decades down the road, one has a higher risk for thyroid cancer. So totally a problem. And if you take a bunch of iodine, you stop the thyroid from absorbing iodine. So that's how it's helpful. And there's a lot of products that are being pushed right now, like the IOSAT or NORAD, and people are just buying these things up like crazy. But when does it help and when is it not recommended? I'm going to touch on that real briefly. Someone else is asking about T3, low T3 and T3 uptake, M. Frankie. So, got a couple questions about this whole T3 thing. We'll definitely talk about that. M. Frankie and Kim, if you all want to share any other scores like TSH or thyroid antibodies, and you don't have to put specific numbers. If you have them, you can. If you want to put just general statements about, they're high, they're low, they're normal, whatever, we can work with that. But we'll talk a lot about T3 today for sure. Okay, so briefly back to the whole radiation and iodine, and should you stock potassium iodide to protect against possible radiation? Well, here's some details about this. So it does help. Like I mentioned, it helps because it shuts off your thyroid, but it only helps if there's no reason you shouldn't take iodine, if you're of the right age window, if you take the exact right amount, and if you take it at the right time, and if the radiation source is really nearby. So if those 5 criteria are met, then this can be helpful. There's a saying about the devil's in the details, right? So let's jump in the details real quick. So what are the medical contraindications? Well, one is a history of thyroid disease. So the World Health Organization has showed that any possible benefit of protecting against longer-term cancer is outweighed by the harm from the megadose of iodine for those with thyroid disease. So it's not recommended for those with thyroid disease. It's also not recommended for those who have active thyroid antibodies. And then also those with a known iodine allergy or those with dermatitis herpetiformis. So those people out of the gate shouldn't even think about it. And for many people who have thyroid disease, that's them, right? So we'll take them out. Briefly, specific ages. Well, if someone is under 12, sometimes it can be helpful. Over 12, almost never. So exact right dosage. There's a blog post that I'm putting up again that talks about the dosages. These things are available, but the doses are based per body weight. And if you're the tiniest bit above or below, there's either no benefit or there's more harm than benefit. Well, these last two now, as if the medical contraindications weren't a big enough of a deal breaker, these last two were really big deal breakers. So timed correctly. Well, that means within 4 to 24 hours, you have to know when you're going to be exposed to radiation. If you're going to be exposed on an ongoing basis or more than once, it's never helpful. But if you know you're going to have one exposure and you know within a 4 to 24-hour window when that exposure will be, then it can help. Most people have exposure. If they do, it's going to be more ongoing, or they're not going to know when it's going to hit, right? So that makes it also pretty difficult. The last one is if the radiation source is nearby. What does nearby mean? Well, several miles. So yeah, tough thing, but if a nuclear bomb is going to go off a few miles from you, your biggest concern is not thyroid cancer 30 years down the road. You've got way bigger things to worry about, and that would be a horrible situation. So yeah, this is something that it's just not useful for those who have thyroid disease. And the situations in which it is useful are almost impossible to orchestrate. You've got to be of the right age window. You've got to only be exposed once. You got to know exactly when you're going to be exposed. You got to get just the right amount. And it's got to be right by some radiation. If you know within 4 to 24 hours ahead of time that there's going to be a nuclear exposure within a few miles from you, you could start walking, and in 4 hours, you could easily cover several miles. And you'd be far enough away to where that would make a bigger difference. So yeah, this is not really a helpful thing. And those who have written in asking about worrying about needing to take this iodine because of radiation exposure, no, it's just not helpful. Okay. Let me go on to some of our newer questions. Oh, here's some that came in advance, and I'm going to come back to these, but I want to talk a bit more about the T3 one because I saw several good questions asking about T3. And I'm looking at the questions in real time too. So I'll give some feedback on those if you don't mind. One of them was medical medium full of crap. Why do I trust him? Everyone tell me to get his book. Well, the medical medium, so medium, right? So a medium, information comes from the spirit world, okay? So I'm sure he's a nice enough guy, but information from the spirit world. So Casper the Friendly Ghost. So you're getting advice from Casper the Friendly Ghost. There's a lot of times to where I need to get advice or help from something. Like I get turned around in a city I'm not familiar with, and I might check out Google Maps and I'll say, hey, take me to this address. But I'm probably not going to ask Casper, the friendly ghost, to find the address for me. So if you got a good connection with Casper, the friendly ghost, and you got consistent, reliable, helpful data from him, that's your call. Personally, I don't find Casper, the friendly ghost, a good source of information. So that's how I feel about that. Yeah. Lots more good questions coming in, you guys. Let me just take a peek to see if there were any that were related to prior ones. Joanne had one, magnesium citramate changed to magnesium chelate. So the chelate, it was citrate in the new CalMag. Is that the one you meant, Joanne? And that was intentional in terms of just a little more concentration. There's also a chelate in some different ones, but I think you're talking about the new CalMag. If you weren't, let me know and I'll give you more detailed answers. Let me see if there are some related to this. So Snore and Susie, we live 10 miles from a nuclear plant and keep iodine on hand. So within a few miles, that is relevant. But again, do you have contraindications? Do you have thyroid disease? Do you have active antibodies? Do you have iodine allergy? Are you outside of the age window? Are you more than 12 years of age? Do you know within 4 to 24 hours of when the exposure will be? Will it be one-time exposure or ongoing? See, these are the considerations that are real practicalities. And if those things don't line up, it wouldn't be helpful to take it. Melody Brown, no ghosts. Yeah, I don't doubt that he gives a lot of information that's probably useful. I've read just a little bit of his stuff. A lot of things he says are just simply not true. And he'll even say these are things that science has yet to confirm or find. Well, yeah, you can't argue with ghosts. You can't say ghosts are wrong, right? I can be wrong. I'm often wrong. My views will evolve. My views will change. But yeah, I don't get information from ghosts. And I love the little ghost picture from Melody too. That was cool. So back to the T3. So several good T3 questions coming in live. And let's see, the first one, Kim asked one, and then M. Frankie also asked one. So Kim said, T3 is 67, some hair loss and digestive issues. So Kim, let's pull these things apart. There's your symptoms, which are real. And the whole goal of the game is for you to feel better. That's all that matters. That's all that's important. So the question is your T3 of 67 the cause of the hair loss and digestive issues? Now, Kim, if you've got any more details at hand, here you go, you put more stuff. So you put your TSH, free T4, looking for non-medical strategies. Kim, I don't know if you're on thyroid medication or not. That could be a useful data point too, if I could ask. Either way, though, the T3 wouldn't so much be the source of problems. So there's a couple ideas that are conflicting. One of which is that healthy people should have lower levels of TSH. They should be low normal. And a lot of you know this, some of you don't. The TSH is upside down. The lower it is, the more thyroid hormone someone has. And if the TSH is way, way too high, it means there's too little thyroid hormone there. So because healthy people tend to have a lower TSH, many have argued that healthy people must have to have a higher T3. And if T3 is below range or a little below range, even all by itself, many are told you've got to have your T3 higher, and that'll help all these problems. Now, the truth is that, Kim, if you were badly lacking in thyroid hormone overall, it certainly could be a factor for all the things you mentioned. But the question is where you are now, and I just saw the new message, thank you for that, you're not on thyroid medication. So the question is, would some way tweaking your T3, would that be the main thing causing those symptoms? And the data is really clearly that it's not. Now, the other question is, what would be, and is your thyroid relevant? So Kim, I don't know if you know about your thyroid antibody status. If you did have high levels of anti-thyroid peroxidase or antithyroglobulin, those could be factors causing the hair loss symptoms especially, and also fatigue symptoms. And they can do that even when other thyroid markers are stable. And in that case, the thyroid can be quite relevant. Now, there's many other things that can cause those problems. One simple one that I talk about a bit is a thing called thyrogastric syndrome. So Kim, I don't know if you've actually been diagnosed with having thyroid disease or if you've got autoimmune thyroid disease, but if someone does, they've got about a 30 to 40% chance of having this thing called thyrogastric syndrome. And I bring that up because it can be a big factor for causing iron malabsorption and then hair loss, which can be really connected. And it can also cause some digestive issues. So, yeah, Kim, I would think about other things that could cause these particular problems. But barring high levels of antibodies, I wouldn't say your thyroid levels would be causes of that. And I wouldn't say that manipulating your thyroid levels would really improve or change those symptoms. So, yeah, hopefully that was useful. There was a related question or comment here. Low T3 and low T3 uptake on 30 milligrams NDT armor. Do I need T3? So M. Frankie's asking us about low T3 and low T3 uptake. Now, the funny thing, M. Frankie, so low T3 uptake, that's a test that's kind of gone by the wayside. And it's actually a backward test like TSH. So when T3 uptake is low, that means someone's got higher levels of T3. So if you've got a low T3 and a low T3 uptake, it probably means you're looking at a low total T3, and you might even have a high level of free T3, which is more active. But yeah, if you're taking armor, the question is, do you need armor? Is it likely helpful? Do you need medication in general? Those who do need and do take natural thyroid are getting about 4 parts of T4 to 1 part of T3. That's a lot. For many, that can work fine. For some, it's too much. But for pretty much no one is that too little. So yeah, you wouldn't be lacking in T3, M. Frankie, but I would even question whether or not it's necessary or helpful, or what was the diagnosis giving rise to it. So yeah. All right. I think I saw several more good ones. Yeah, here we go. Started taking antibody support. TPO went down from 650 to 212. However, thyroglobulin went up from 44 to 94. Kapoor. Hey, that's really cool. Now, to put some context on that, the antibodies themselves can cause symptoms, and they are a really big deal. Now, they're most significant when they get up in the thousands range, and your TPO is pretty close to that. Your TPO is almost 700 or 650, and it's gone down by a factor of 3. Now, your thyroglobulin wasn't even yet in the hundreds, and it changed. Now, thyroglobulin can bounce around a little bit. So the fact that it went from 40 to 90, it's still below 100, but your TPO went from 650 to 212. That's a big win. So that's a really cool thing. If you're not already, please do take a look at the Thyroid Reset Diet. You can get a lot of benefit from it, and it can make things go a lot better with the antibody support. The other thought is that the antibody support works best with the thyroid daily, the new thyroid daily, the new thyroid multi. So yeah, please do combine those if you're not already. And Margaret got a related one here. I was just talking about that one. I take the new thyroid daily along with Omega and CalMag. Just wondering if there's enough vitamin D in the thyroid daily. Yeah, Margaret, great question. So it's there, and there's 1,000 IU, and that's lower than you see in some other supplements, and that's really on purpose. The data on vitamin D has evolved a lot. If you follow the news on it, you've seen that there's still a lot of positive attributes to it, but the ideal ranges and levels, they keep getting narrower and they keep getting a little lower. So my goal is to really keep it to where what you're consuming is based upon best current evidence and brings you back to the healthiest ranges. More is not better, especially not back from the not in the case of vitamin D. I just see this from Linda. Linda here from Maricopa. So glad you're enjoying time in Minnesota. I was one of your patients more than 20 years ago. We rented your home in Scottsdale. Of course, I remember you, Linda. Great to see your name here. Hope you guys are doing wonderful. And yeah, we're here now, really enjoying Minnesota again. You guys are from here too, if I remember correctly. Yeah, the kids have grown up, and our daughter was barely born back when you guys were there. She was very little then, and yeah, great to see you, and hope you guys are doing wonderful. That's really neat. Fun to reconnect on these things. Okay, so lots of good questions. I had a few queued up here as well, and now I'm just kind of looking around which one to go with. Hey, Liz, I've seen you here before. And it's a related one. Cynthia, agree, feel worse on higher levels of vitamin D. Yeah, Cynthia, this is kind of wild. So vitamin D, there's this narrow range which has lower risks for many problems. And that seems to be somewhere around like the mid 30 nanograms per mil to the mid 50 nanograms per mil. Now, there's a lot of health experts that push for higher doses and higher blood levels, and there's a reason for that. And it's a bizarre reason, it's an unnecessary reason, but the blood levels we use in the States are not the same as the blood levels they use in most research articles. This is simply a matter of standard units versus metric units. So imagine you asked a friend how far it was to drive to, you're going to go visit your friend and say, well, how far is your house from me? Oh, the house is 100 miles away. And you think, great, I'm going to head out right now. And it turns out they meant 100 kilometers and you drove right past their house, right? That's what happened with vitamin D. It's that stupid of an error and it's that unnecessary. So there's all these research articles that talk about the benefits of being like 75 to 150 nanomoles per liter, right? Whole different units. And so a lot of experts have read these studies. And they've told everyone, oh, this is where your blood levels have to be. I want to see this on your blood test. I'm like, no, you guys, those are different units. You got to divide that by 2.5 to convert that into the units we have in our US labs. But because that wasn't done, people are giving doses that are far above what's safe or helpful. And it makes me nuts. I had an interview with Dr. Deba Boone, who's a parathyroid specialist. And she's had case after case of people who are sick. So where did you go? There you go, Cynthia. So when someone gets too much, one of the ways they can feel badly is because they can get hypercalcemic. They can pull too much calcium in their bloodstream. That can make them tired. It can wreck their digestion. It can cause joint inflammation. And Dr. Deba Boone on my podcast, we talked about a patient that she worked with to where they were bedridden. I mean, they were full on disabled because of this hypercalcemic syndrome. And the culprit was a dose of vitamin D, Cynthia, exactly as high as you were taking. It was only 5,000 units, which is far too much, but it's really not an unusual amount. And her blood levels were in the range that many experts are calling optimal. She was between 60 and 80 nanograms per mil. Well, if we're talking about metric units, that would have been great, but we don't have metric units. We have US units. Okay, that was a long rant. Yeah, Kapurl forgot to mention T3 uptake is 20. We'll add thyroid multi. I am gluten-free and dairy-free. Cool. So please do still look at the thyroid reset diet. A lot of iodine does come from gluten and dairy. Those are big sources. But for most people, it's not really that gluten and dairy are inherently harmful. It's more so that they're providing too much iodine that can be a problem for those who are prone to thyroid disease. But they're not the only sources. And that's why I mentioned that I want you to be aware of the other sources of that. So there's iodine in salt. Some salt is fortified with iodine. Many kinds of salt have naturally occurring iodine in amounts that are just not safe. We also see it in a lot of supplements. Many types of seafood have it, of course. A lot of personal care products have that also. So yeah, please dig through and think about any other hidden sources of iodine. Those could be big factors for you as well. Okay, so great questions rolling in here. So Liz has one, can omega-3 and D help with reducing thyroid antibodies? So Liz, this is a good question, and there's a couple ways to answer that. So are they generally good things to have some of in your body? Yep, and I'm a fan of that. And as far as baseline amounts, the Thyroid Daily Bundle, which is the Thyroid Daily, the CalMag, the Omega Pure, that covers the basis for those nutrients. Now, are there studies saying that adding those things in push down thyroid antibodies for those who are high? There have been some studies looking at that. They've not shown to be effective in that way. So you're healthier to have those nutrients, but there's no data saying those nutrients push down thyroid antibodies. As far as nutraceuticals that actually push down thyroid antibodies, that's antibody support. And all three of the ingredients in there are clinically proven to make a really big difference. But besides what's there, nothing else has been shown to be effective in those ways. So yeah, hope that's useful. So related comments, I always love related comments. And I'm seeing a lot of healthcare workers here and a lot of doctors here. Welcome, you guys. Glad to have you. Just to please know, as practitioners, I'll be starting some case reviews for practitioners. If you visit thyroidspecificformulations.com and apply for a wholesale account, even before you buy anything, you'll be invited to join in some case reviews. I'm getting a lot of really detailed, good questions from practitioners about how do I help my patients, and here's all the details. And so what I'm going to do is I'll do some live ones just like this that are for practitioners only. And then also there's some that I'll do some recorded answers to, and I'll keep those archived. So I'll print up the whole case. I'll give access to a recorded answer so you can look at old ones as you wish. And we'll do live ones like this here where we can talk about your cases. So yeah, many practitioners are here and know that that's coming on for a resource for you as well. And related one, are there studies of high dose vitamin D turning MS around? Also, vitamin D at night, better for sleep. So the thing about vitamin D, this is really weird, you guys. It turns out vitamin D is a negative acute phase reactant. Now, that's a mouthful. What it means is that when you're sick, vitamin D goes down. And there's a lot of things that could mean. One thing it could mean is that sick people need more vitamin D than healthy people. Totally possible. Another thing it could mean is that when you're sick, your body can't tolerate vitamin D and it wants to get rid of it. That's also possible. Another scenario is vitamin D goes down for reasons that are neither helpful nor harmful when you're sick. But MS, like you asked about, thyroid disease, insomnia, you name it, anything you could shake a stick at probably relates to low vitamin D. And for a long time, a lot of people assumed that therefore boosting vitamin D would help that problem. But pretty much every way we've ever tested it has shown that it doesn't reverse the problem. So now the general idea is that, yeah, vitamin D is low when you have MS or thin bones or autoimmune disease or you name it, but that doesn't mean low vitamin D caused the problem. It's more so that when you're sick and your body has inflammation, vitamin D gets pushed down. It might even be adaptive. But that's why there's such a big disconnect between all the conditions that correlate with low vitamin D and no studies showing that vitamin D helps these conditions. So yeah, just because your vitamin D is low when you're sick doesn't mean low vitamin D made you sick. It doesn't mean vitamin D will help reverse that same problem. So yeah, crazy thing. A few more related questions here. And I want to go deeper on some of these that I've brought up already. So Kapoor, so I need to look for iodine. Is that correct? I don't eat fish. I need to brainstorm. I use sea salt from Costco. So Kapoor, please grab the thyroid reset diet. It'll talk the whole thing. You don't need to look. You want to look for iodine because there's a narrow window you want. It's not that you need more of it. You don't need none, but you need a very small amount to help reverse thyroid disease. And we've had many clinical trials showing that thyroid disease is reversible for 80 or more % of people who get to that right iodine window. I'm seeing comments show up. It's such a great book. Thank you so much for sharing that. But yeah, and I talked about those studies in the book. And I talk about some meal plans, some recipes, where some of their hidden sources of iodine are. But it's a crazy thing how much it can reverse the disease. And yeah, even those that have had it for years, even those who have bad versions of the disease, even those on medication, we've seen reversal over and over and over again. Okay, let's see. Can you explain iodine in skincare again? We should be avoiding products with algae and seaweed, right? Yes, thank you for that. So the simple version is that iodine in skincare goes into your body. We absorb it. So our skin is highly permeable and iodine dissolves across it. The amount we absorb could sound small. It's about 4.5%. But when you consider how much iodine is actually in personal care products, so I've got the numbers top of mind for conditioner. Conditioners use a thing called polyvinyl pyridone, or PVP. So that's Papa, Victor, Papa in the phonetic alphabet. If you buy natural products, they'll call that kelp extract or sea vegetable extract. It's the same thing, right? It's the exact same thing. So they use about 1 to 2% of that. And PVP is about 12% iodine. And you absorb about 4.5% of that. But when you use conditioner, I took a few pumps from my wife's products and I just, here's a pump of conditioner and I weighed it. So a pump is often 10 to 20 grams. So when you crunch all that together, the absorption, the amount, you're talking about 1,000 to 2,000 micrograms, or about 10 times a day's safe amount that you can absorb from one application of one product. So there's a whole lot. And I've had countless people that have tried to heal their thyroid, not see it work, until they dug through their personal care products and found out that was the big stopgap for them. So yeah, the big thing is seaweed type products, PVP. And in the book, and you gave feedback on the book, so you must have it. I do give listing of personal care products ingredients, the ingredients to really look out for. But that's a big factor for people. Oh, heck. So, and part of it is an opportunity to heal the thyroid. The other part is that sadly, when iodine is misused, it can really wreck thyroid function. So Jody just wrote in, Jody said that the outer third of my eyebrows fell out after my naturopath had me supplement with iodoral. Do you know if they will regrow? It's been about 2 years. Jody, I'm sorry. So the outer third of eyebrows falling out can equate to thyroid antibodies. Jody, I don't know if you've tracked your thyroid peroxidase or antithyroglobulin, but if they are still high, that could be a factor. Now, the other bizarre thing, Jody, is that iodoral, some of the doses are so high, it can take months and months and months to get it out. You said it's been about 2 years. It's probably out of your body, but when hair follicles are damaged, either head hair or eyebrow follicles, it may be 6 to 18 months for them to repair after the damage is stopped. So I'm going to make up some numbers, Jody. If you took, say, a 6 milligram, a 12 milligram, or heaven forbid, a 50 milligram iodoral for a while, it might have taken you 6 months or more to clear that out of your body, assuming you had a pretty low iodine intake. If there was still some coming in from other sources, it could have taken longer. But considering that and considering the time frame for follicles to reheal, it wouldn't be at all surprising if yours got better in the coming months. It definitely could take a couple of years altogether. Jody, please look at the sources of iodine that I've talked about in the book. You could also consider urinary iodine to creatinine ratio testing to be sure you have pretty well excreted all of it. But there's a few thoughts about that for you. Facebook user. So here's a quick, easy one I can help with. Margaret Nixon. I don't understand. You said there's 1,000 IUs of vitamin D, but the thyroid daily pill says 25 micrograms. Yep, and yep. So they're different units. When you convert, that's what you get. So yeah, my apologies for not saying it in the same units that it was labeled, but those are bioequivalents. Wow, lots of good questions here, you guys. Salt water conditioner, really not a problem. No iodine added to that. Easy one. Epsom salts, same thing. No real iodine in Epsom salts, so easy one there. M. Frankie, fluoride, bromide also negatively affecting thyroid function. That's talked about a lot, and that's talked about by those who are pushing high-dose iodine. I wrote a detailed paper on that, and I'm going to share that with you. It really surprised me because I don't have any big agenda other than what's going to help, what's going to make the biggest bit of difference. So I spent quite a bit of time looking at all the literature that we had on fluoride, bromide, chlorine, to see how big of a factor these things were. Now, the truth is that megadose fluoride totally can slow down thyroid function. Is that kind of the dose that we get from municipal water that has it? Is that how much fluoride we get from food that it's fluoride? Not so much, even from dental treatment. But fluoride supplements or areas that geologically have high fluoride in their water, that can be enough to hurt your thyroid. Here's a bizarre thing, guys. So bromide, anyone else hear about bromides being bad or dangerous or icky things? I've heard that a lot. It turns out that bromide is the most recently discovered essential mineral. So we need bromide, aka bromine. We need it for cell membrane formation. Now, it's in so many naturally occurring sources, pretty much no one gets deficient in it. And that's why it took so long to see that. And like everything, it can be toxic at a point of being too much. But there was actually a study about bromide and thyroid function. And they tracked all these thyroid markers on people while they gave them all these different supplemental doses of bromide. And some had none, they were placebos. Others had amounts, but all of them were way above what you would ever get from your diet. And none of them had any negative effect on thyroid function. It wasn't enough to be clearly statistically significant, but those in the higher doses probably had better thyroid function, not even like kind of worse. So yeah, those things are really not concerns, thankfully. Okay, so I'm having a blast with you guys and enjoying this, and I'm seeing so many questions. I won't be able to keep up, and sorry about that. I will be back next week. I'll get a couple more today. Let me just get a few more here. So here was a detailed one. Is there a question in this? So Cynthia, off topic, the question is, I have a 15-year-old daughter, family history, want to get tested so she can avoid mismanagement of her health. What should be ordered in addition to her listing off all these things? Is it helpful to get baseline levels never tested annually? Currently doing your 7-day challenge. Cool. Yeah. And you follow myself and Dr. Isabella Wentz. Thank you for that, Cynthia. Testing your daughter, what I would encourage is looking for if there are specific symptoms and problems. This is a tough thing. So if you take any one person and check a long enough list of lab values, you will find abnormalities. There's a certain rate of just false positives. And if you do enough tests, you will have false positives. So the tough thing is that tests have to be done when there's a specific concern. So if your daughter has suspicious symptoms, that's worth looking at more closely. But if you just test everything in your daughter, you're going to find stuff wrong. And this is something to where I work really hard to try to educate doctors about this. But there was a view that I used to share that was the more tests you ran, the better doctor you were, and the more thoroughly you were looking at things. And I came to realize it's kind of the opposite, sadly. The more tests you run, if there's a good reason for the test, if there's a high level of suspicion, totally makes sense. And that's diagnostic testing. Now, screening is different. If you take someone who says, I don't feel well, and you just test them for everything, it would seem like you're being thorough. But again, because of the rate of inevitable false positives, if you test blindly, you're always going to see something show up, but it's not always going to be relevant. And the more things you test, the more likely you're going to find things show up that are completely meaningless, that are only factitional and only because of laboratory error. So yeah, the real truth is that you want to really home in on specific suspicions and then diagnose them. But if you take someone and screen with a whole lot of tests, you will find things that are meaningless. And sadly, then people will try to treat these things which really weren't there to begin with. And this creates a big spiral of issues. As far as taking someone that you suspect could have early thyroid disease, the first way that would show up would be with abnormal thyroid antibodies. You did mention TPO. The other one is anti-thyroglobulin. So those are the two earliest indicators. But again, the more things you test, not the better. With a high family history, that's worth thinking about. But Cynthia, a bigger factor I would think about is really just avoiding the big sources of iodine. That's the most controllable single thing. Second one is making sure she's selenium sufficient. So encouraging her to have a couple of Brazil nuts each day. But those go a long ways toward that. So related question, I'll grab one or two more of those. This is kind of like another one that came in. What are the top tests to find out about overall health for thyroid? Non-blood tests can be done. Person with no blood test for your needle phobia. Yeah, that's a tricky one. And I hear you. You're not the only one. A lot of folks hate needles. Many people do. Besides blood tests, there's nothing really useful for gauging thyroid function. There is a lot about basal body temperature. There is data about Achilles reflex. There's these things that are done, but they're just not accurate or useful. So yeah. And Liz, I saw that one before. I'm sorry for not getting to that, but connection between Hashimoto's and low B12. So Liz, the main one there would be B12 malabsorption from thyrogastric syndrome. That can happen. And if it's bad enough, it can cause low B12, definitely. Okay. Margaret, doing the 7-day challenge right now again. Love your books and your products and getting my question answered. You're awesome. Thank you so much for that. Claire, my antibodies are 575. I did just buy your antibody support. Would like to know if LDN would be good to take also. So yeah, great question, Claire. So the antibody support, please do consider the thyroid daily with it. It is meant to really, there's some things that, so my rationale was a lot of the different formulas I made would do well with certain trace minerals and certain vitamins. However, if I put everything that each formula needed, and if you took a couple different formulas, you might get too much of something. So I formulated all of them to prevent that from happening. I made it to where those general nutrients were all in the thyroid daily. And you could do antibody support, you could do nodule control, you could do hyperthyroid support, you name it. And when you're combining those with thyroid daily, you're not going to overlap things. You're not going to get harmful excesses. And too much is inherently harmful, but also it's less effective. And I've had so many times where someone is taking vitamins, but they're taking a dose that's too high to work. And this is a tough one to wrap the head around, but there's a window of efficacy for everything. And if you're above or below that window, it's not going to work. It's easy to realize that too little won't work, but too much is just like too little. So I wanted things to be just right. Think about like cooking, think about like 3 times as much salt in a recipe. That's as bad or worse than no salt. And it's the same way with micronutrients. So I made all these to combine properly. So yeah, do consider the thyroid daily. Now you asked about LDN. So low dose naltrexone, this is a narcotic category medication. It is a narcotic antagonist, but it does act on the central nervous system. Now, at low dosages, there are side effects. They do include fatigue. They can be impaired sleep quality. And there have been cases of people developing seizures from low dose naltrexone. So it can cause seizures. So there's some known side effects. Now, there's nothing that has zero side effects. So if we had strong data that the benefits of LDN were so massive, I could imagine a scenario in which we could overlook some of the side effects. I could imagine that. So there was a big study done on LDN recently and thyroid function. The promise that many talk about who push for LDN is that if you take it, your thyroid will heal and you'll need less medication. That's what they commonly will talk about. And so the study was done to check that claim. And it was really well designed. They took about 300 people in 2 different groups, so like 600 people total. Everyone was already on thyroid medication, all different kinds, all different doses. One group took LDN as commonly prescribed, one group did not. And they tracked how many people needed dose reductions or dose increases. And if LDN healed the thyroid or caused people to need less medicine, the group taking LDN should have had more dose reductions than the ones not taking LDN. It was easy that could have shown up, but it didn't show up. In fact, the opposite showed up. Those not taking LDN had more reductions of medication than those taking LDN. So the one exact thing is claimed to do the best, it didn't do. In fact, the data wasn't clear that it made things worse, but it was possible. That was one of the possible scenarios. And that was the one high quality study done, a large number of people, a good period of time. So yeah, it's not something I really push for. Cotton candy cuties. I was a patient of yours years ago at your Scottsdale office. Love to see you on YouTube sharing your immense knowledge. Thank you. Well, thank you for that. I don't think that your name was Cotton Candy Cuties. So I can understand anyone's wish to be anonymous. I won't push you to break that. But if I did see the name, I would bet anything I would remember who you are. I remember almost all the names of people that I saw. But thank you so much for that kind feedback. I appreciate it. Okay, you guys. So a lot of really good questions. I really appreciate the feedback here. Wow, I'm just trying to pick up one more. Let's see. So Lynn, here's a great one. Let me just grab Lynn's for our last question tonight. I am only taking low dose compounded T3, but my doctor quit me. Your doctor quit you. Okay. So your doctor must have retired or I don't know, moved away. I'm not sure, but did have labs before that. My T3 was low. I don't want to deal with it anymore. I don't have Hashis. Can I just wean myself off? So Lynn, there's 2 questions I want to pull apart. Is it possible to withdraw from thyroid medication? And then is it a good idea for someone to adjust their own medications without medical guidance? And the way I asked that question, I bet you know the answer to that question. You want medical guidance for adjusting a medication. Now, you wouldn't really take T3 because you have low T3. Lynn, you probably came on later, but check through the recording on the replay on this after we finish. I talked a lot about the whole low T3 thing. I wouldn't have wanted you on medication just because you had low T3. That wouldn't be a good reason to start it. And there really aren't scenarios in which T3 all by itself is a good idea or helpful. And there are many scenarios in which people can safely come off of medications. They often don't need them. So Lynn, if you're not already, jump on the Thyroid Reset diet. The term is de-prescribing. If you Google Alan Christensen de-prescribing, there's a good handout. you'll want some kind of a prescriber to work with you because there's a whole taper process that it outlines. And someone's got to oversee that and prescribe the new medication to lower potencies. So, yeah, the odds are very good you could come off. But yeah, do it with some help. Oh, Sharon. Hey, Sharon, totally remember you. I'm not saying the last name here aloud, but completely remember you, Sharon. And yeah, I hope you're doing great. Nice to hear from you again. Okay, I will wrap this up. Joanne, you're so welcome. Thank you for that feedback. Always good to see you too, Joanne. And Cynthia, you're welcome. And yeah, thanks for the kind feedback, you guys. The lighting is kind of tricky, but yeah, I'm gonna go take the paddleboard. Kieran left me unattended for a few minutes. She went to town to do some errands. So I'll wrap this up. I'll take the paddleboard and go out across the lake and get some fresh air. And we got loons out here all the time. I don't bother them, but they often come right up by me, and I just love hearing their call and seeing them do their thing. So I'll go hang out with the loons for a little bit and come back and figure out what's for supper. So yeah, hope you guys have a great evening tonight. And I'll have to start talking more about foods, recipes, stuff like that. So we can cover questions about those things too. I've got a cookbook coming out this coming year and have a lot of fun in the kitchen these days. So yeah, thanks for a great night, you guys. We'll talk real soon. Bye-bye.